on ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory. This is an extraordinary story. It's a remarkable story, actually, about a little boy tricked into slavery who endures extreme poverty, a tiger attack, civil war, earthquakes, and manages to survive to create a future for himself in the pursuit of protecting girls in Nepal from trafficking and child marriage.
Hello, my name is Som Tamang. When I went to Kathmandu at age 10, I got taken by some village men, and they promised me the school, but I never seen the school for a long, long time. So I was just there to help them cook, help them clean their house, wash their clothes. Anything is possible with courage and hard work and community support behind it. Kirsty and I have built a strong relationship after the earthquake in 2015, and I look forward to sharing my story with everyone.
Yeah, it just beggars belief, but it is a true story. Himalayan Dreams, the story of Som Tamang, and it is written by an equally as remarkable person, journalist, Director of Emotion Video and Training and Production, Kirsty Nancarrow. Possibly you've heard of Kirsty's name. It's familiar to you because she's lived in Bantwa, Alice Springs, for a time in the 90s, then again in the 2000s as a journalist at ABC Alice Springs. And I wonder, Kirsty, are you sinking into the studio? Are you putting on a pair of comfy thongs right now?
Well, I think I'd be more at home if I took my shoes off, Lyrella, because I remember my first day here in 1999, and I was a young journalist then. I was 23 years old, just finished my master's degree, and I wanted to make an impression. So I bought a new suit. It was a dress. It was a kind of olive green dress with a matching jacket, had the makeup, had the hair, had the high heels, walked in, looked around and saw that almost no one in the office had shoes on. But you know what? I maintained my standards the whole time that I was here.
Did you?
I did.
That would have been a very hot experience, I imagine.
I kept my shoes on the whole time.
Oh, right. And your suit?
Not my suit. I let go of the suit pretty quickly.
Phew. All right. So obviously your job as a journalist, it has taken you all over the world reporting. So where and when did you meet Som?
People might be surprised to know that I actually met Som in Cairns, where I currently live, and it's where Som lives now. He's actually been there longer than I have. He's now clocked up 20 years in far north Queensland, and it was a couple of days after the earthquakes in 2015. They happened on Anzac Day, and I discovered that Som was a Nepalese national who was living in Cairns who had been impacted by the earthquake. So I reached out to him a couple of days after the disaster, which had happened on a weekend. And he was very open about having me around to his home to talk to him about what he was going to do, because he had very little information out of his village, Batassi, which is northeast of Kathmandu, a couple of days' walk for the likes of you and I. He could probably run it in about 5 hours. And he knew that all of the focus of the disaster response would be in places that tourists went, so Kathmandu, the Himalayan trails, and he thought if I don't get something happening quickly, the villages are going to, the ones that are still, where people have survived, they're going to then have that secondary issue of having no shelter, no food, no running water, and I need to get over there and see what I can do. So he mounted a campaign, got supplies together, money together from the Cairns community, and off he went. So I interviewed him about that and then kept checking back in with him on subsequent visits to Nepal. And I began to know more about his story, his own personal story, and his motivation for starting an organisation called Friends of Himalayan Children. And I didn't realise, because you don't when you meet Som, he's terribly humble and stoic, and you might have got that impression listening to him at the beginning there. I had tears in my eyes when I started hearing his story again, because he just it's a case of survival for anyone that lives in rural Nepal, and the things that we think are dramatic or life-changing or, catastrophic is just part of life, and you can very much get that impression from Som. So one thing led to another. I became a bit more invested in him and the work that he did. He asked me to be the MC of their first International Women's Day event, raising money for the hostel. And on that night, I started sponsoring the first of 3 girls through Friends of Himalayan Children. And having covered lots of natural disasters, both in Central Australia and in far north Queensland, I knew that there's usually an outpouring of support straight afterwards. But as time goes on, other things happen, people's attention gets diverted, and the need is still there. And so I decided about 18 months after the earthquake that it was my time to go and volunteer and help. And I said, I can cook, I can clean, I can try to build. I'll do anything that you need me to do. And he said, I want you to go and teach journalism to the students in the school. So off I went for a month to Batasi village and immersed myself in Som's world and the work that he has done. And I was so inspired by the impact that he's had on these children who get up at dawn, do all of their chores and walk to school and spend a long day there. They spend 6 days a week at school. They're so passionate about their education and the opportunity that's been given to them that I thought, no, this needs to be told to the wider world. So I came home from that trip at the end of 2016 and said to Som, I need to write your story.
So that was 2016 that you came back. Obviously it's 2024. How did you write the book with him and over what period of time?
So it took quite a while to sort of get to the point where I could start. I was back at the ABC for a while. I then took a job with Queensland Health and I really wanted to do this, but I wasn't sure where to start. And it's quite daunting going from being a journalist and having the instant gratification of being able to see your work every day on air or online or on the television to this thing that stretches out, for a very long period of time. It was just over a year that it took me to write the book, but I had to work out how I was going to make it happen. And as I said before, Som is not very forthcoming. He doesn't really think things are noteworthy. So it took a lot of digging to pull together some of the stories that are in this book. There are stories in here that his long-term partner, Couzens, didn't know about, people that have been associated with Friends of Himalayan Children since its early inception didn't know about. And I did this by talking to lots of people. There's over 50 people in the book. And I went back in 2018 on a women-only Everest base camp trek, which Som was going to be on. And I thought, this is the only way I'm going to spend a long time with Som, immersed in his world and experience what it's like to be a Himalayan trekking guide and gather the interviews with his family, his mum and dad, his family members, girls who he had helped through Friends of Himalayan Children. And I might add as an aside, a beautiful thing about that experience was some of the girls who were in my class, Year 10 class in 2016, were now trekking guides with Som's other organisation, Take on Nepal, which is a female-focused trekking business, which he set up basically to give young women a pathway to very well-paid employment. It's probably the most lucrative industry to work in Nepal, but has been dominated by men. And as part of his campaign to empower girls through education, he also created an employment pathway. So a lot of these girls were my guides in 2018. And that's where I gathered the material, really, the starting point to tell Som's story. And then I had interviews with him over the intervening years. And finally, in 2020, in the middle of COVID, I had decided that enough was enough. I needed to make this happen. And my husband was very much driving this as well. He's like, if you don't take yourself out of the workforce for a while, this book is never going to happen, and I think you need to do that. So that's what I did.
On ABC Radio Darwin and the Northern Territory, with you this morning is Kirsty Nancarrow. She has written the book Himalayan Dreams, the story of Som Tamang. It is an amazing story. It's an extraordinary story. The timeline is pretty horrific of what happens to him. I did mention that he was tricked into slavery. He endured extreme poverty, a tiger attack, as I say, civil war, earthquakes, and yet has managed to survive. This energy that you have obviously seen and are writing about, his energy, his devotion to eradicating human suffering, where does that all come from, Kirsty?
He was just born with it. He was very close to his grandfather, who was the witch doctor, I suppose, the medicine man of the village. He really wanted Som to take over this mantle when he passed, and Som didn't, because he had other big plans and wanted to give back to the community in a different way. But yeah, he was always quite a spiritual person, and even as a young boy, he realised that girls were being treated differently, and that what was happening to children in his village was wrong. So you'll see throughout the book that there's this theme of him being a fighter for social justice. So even when he's at school, he stands up to his teachers for things that he believes are wrong. He wins or he comes second in the debating competition for the villagers. He's a very passionate person. He's not. He doesn't shine a light on himself, but he will fight for what he believes in, even if it comes at a personal cost. So, yeah, it was a very young age that he developed this sense of social justice, and after his own experience, spending 2 years basically cooking, cleaning, and taking somebody else's children to school. He was 12 by the time he made it back to his village, and he'd almost given up on his education. So he thought, well, I'm going to make sure that my younger siblings don't have that same experience, and particularly his sister. So he had to fight against his culture. Where he lives, it's pretty common for young girls to get married very early, have children very early, and their main role is to farm, to raise children, to look after their husbands' families, and education just isn't seen as a priority. And he just thought that was wrong, so he fought his parents and paid for his sister's education. And I'm pleased to say that she was the first person to guide me to Batasi village in 2016, and we became good friends. And she has now got a diploma in pharmacy, a degree in social work, and is also now living in Cairns for the last year.
Wow. It's just wow. The whole story is wow, from go to woe. It's an extraordinary story. Now that the book is tangible and in your hand, has Som had an opportunity to read it, and what are his thoughts?
Yeah, he's very proud of it. I mean, in every interaction, there's not a lot of emotion, but I've come to know this about him in the last few years, so I don't take offence. But he's I can see that the impact that this is having on him. It's validation for all of the sacrifices he's made, and a celebration of what is possible, regardless of where you are and what you have. In fact, in the beginning of the book, I've included a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, which says, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." And that's exactly what Som did. He didn't let any of those things that you've talked about stop him from his singular goal of making a better life for other children in his village. And if anyone has any doubt about what is possible for every one of us, read the book and have your mind changed.
Himalayan Dreams, the story of Som Tamang, written by journalist, director of e-emotion video training and production Kirsty Nancarrow, former ABC journalist in Alice Springs. The biography of a man who really did escape child slavery and survived, and is now working to eradicate sex trafficking and child marriage in his village. It's an extraordinary tale, a wonderful book. You need to read it. And Kirsty will be talking more about the book and her experience of writing it at Red Kangaroo Books. It's happening this afternoon at 2:30, and she will be signing some limited edition colour copies. Okay? Get there. Thanks so much for the chat, Kirsty.
Thank you. And Darwin will not miss out. I'm going to be back in April at the bookshop signing books on the 13th. So I will let everybody know that there's another opportunity to learn a bit more about this story.
That is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.